my Instagram account was hacked by Russians. This is my villain origin story. This is Storytime with Chris. Welcome once again to Storytime with Chris. Today, I'm going to be telling you about the time that my Instagram account was hacked by Russians and how this led to this podcast and a lot of other things that I'm going to be working on in the future. So yeah, I'm very excited and let's jump right into it. But before I jump into the story about my Instagram being hacked by Russians, let me introduce myself. My name is Chris Dalliff. I am 25 years old and I'm based out of Salt Lake City, Utah. I'm married to a beautiful wife, and we have a little stinky and hairy dog named Flynn. He is a St. Bernard and Poodle mix. And right now, a lot of my interests revolve around hiking, nature, coffee, food, football. I've been getting into video games a little bit. Music. My favorite genre of music, I guess, would be rock and metal. Some of my favorite musical artists, which I'll mention later on in this podcast, are Hollywood Undead, Slipknot, Nothing More, Flower, Fall Out Boy, From Ashes to New, and so many others. Well, I'll talk about music in future episodes. But yeah, that's a little introduction to myself. I also do photography on the side, and I'm working on sort of creating this multimedia empire, which I'm going to talk about later in this podcast, because I'm recording this after all of that's been recorded, and I realized that I didn't really introduce myself or give much of a backstory into who I am. So yeah, that's the main point. And also, I don't know if this part of the recording is going to sound better than the rest of the podcast, because I realized as I'm recording this that some of my settings were changed for some reason whenever I was from the last time I recorded, even though I have preferences that should automatically populate. Anyway, with that being said, I do a lot of photography, and people ask me what I like to shoot. For the most part, I like to shoot landscapes, wildlife, but I also do portraits here and there for people who are willing to pay. And a lot of my family enjoys doing portraits with me. So yeah, that's a little introduction to myself. I have a Tacoma. That is the truck of my choice. And yeah, and the reason why I bring up the Tacoma is because, that's something that I'm really passionate about is Toyotas in particular. One of my buddies really got me into them. And, ever since then, the Tacoma has been my dream truck. So I finally made that dream happen a few years ago. There's some stories that I could tell about my Tacoma, and yeah, we'll get that to there. We'll get there eventually. But what are some other things that people might want to know about myself? My wife and I will be reaching our 2-year anniversary this year, which is wild because it's just insane how time feels like it can be going by so fast, but also so slow at the same time. Our dog will be turning 2 this year, which is insane. In like 2 months. I'll be turning 26, so I'm going to have to get my own health insurance, which is exciting. And yeah, I'm going to be closer to 30 than I am to 20. So you guys, you know what I mean. So yeah, I'm sounding like Patrick Mahomes here. No, this weekend is the Super Bowl, and unfortunately my team ran out of quarterbacks during the NFC Championship game. Otherwise, they would have smashed on the Eagles, and you can take that to the bank because I truly believe that. And I'm not going to argue with you about that. So sorry. Something that I'm doing for the Super Bowl, because my team isn't in it, is I decided to kind of embrace this idea that these are 2 cities that are going to be meeting in this big game. Obviously the biggest game of the entire NFL season. Oh, which brings me to this point, I guess, where I love football. It's basically been a major part of my life for a long time. So yeah, this year I decided to do something a little bit different for the Super Bowl, where, there's Kansas City and then there's Philadelphia, 2 cities that are known for some of their food. Kansas City is known for their barbecue. Philly is known for their cheesesteaks. And so basically how the Super Bowl works with my wife and I is if the Niners are playing in the Super Bowl, then we are going to my family's house because we are all major 49ers fans and it just makes sense to do that. And if they're not, then, well, we go to her sister-in-law's house and she hosts a big Super Bowl party and we do, a big Super Bowl meal with a lot of food and stuff. And so this year, I'm kind of the primary cook in the family between my wife and I, which it's funny because it's the case for a few of the families within this family, if that makes sense. Some of the individual families, their husbands are more of the cook than the wife. So fuck gender roles. It's outdated and I like cooking. So I volunteered to bring 2 dishes this year, for each of the cities that are represented in the Super Bowl. So for Philadelphia, I think it's fairly obvious that I'm going to be doing cheesesteaks because I love cheesesteaks and yeah, it just makes sense. I'm not going to be doing traditional Philly cheesesteaks, unfortunately, for anyone who is passionate about that. These foods that I'm making are inspired by foods that are popular in each of these cities. Jeez, I don't know what's going on with my words today, but yeah, the first one I'm making is the Philly cheesesteak sliders. So they're going to be, pretty small because it's a big family. There's going to be lots of food already, so I'm not going to be doing full-size cheesesteaks. I found a recipe online that looks pretty good, so I'm going to be trying that out. And then for Kansas City, I'm going to be attempting to do, it's called Stroud's cinnamon rolls. I don't know if I've heard of these cinnamon rolls before, but I looked up basically Kansas City Super Bowl foods, and there was a list of a bunch of foods that, food ideas for the Super Bowl, and obviously Kansas City is known for barbecue, and I was really tempted to do like a Kansas City barbecue type of food, but because I was doing a savory dish from Philadelphia, I decided to go towards the sweet route with Kansas City, and so I'm doing Stroud's cinnamon rolls. And the description of them, I've never had these cinnamon rolls, and I think I've heard of Stroud's, but I don't know if there's a different Stroud's that I'm thinking of, because I've heard of, I want to say it's like Stroud's Bakery. I don't know where it's based out of, or if it is actually the cinnamon rolls that I'm thinking about that I discovered. So these cinnamon rolls are more of they're like a cross between cinnamon rolls and dinner rolls. So I'll be interested to see how these taste. I'm not a big baker, so I guess we'll see how these turn out. I have been tempted to recruit my little sister who's big into baking and all of that. She's really good too. So I'll probably just end up doing it on my own. I'll figure it out. But yeah, I'm really excited for that. I guess that's another interest of mine is cooking and particularly smoking, because my wife got me a smoker last year for my birthday. She absolutely just blew me away. I don't know how I could ever outdo that gift, because that was a huge surprise, and I guess she saved up for months and months to get me that smoker. And yeah, my goal this year is to really use that thing a lot more. I already have some recipes coming up that I want to do, like some smoked salmon. There's like a cookbook that she got me for Christmas where it has smoked salmon and salmon tacos, and I want to start getting into fish more because fish is really good for you and has lots of great health benefits. So yeah, anyway, that's what I'm doing for the Super Bowl. I'm planning on filming a TikTok for that. So if you want to follow my TikTok, if you're interested in seeing those recipes and how they turn out, my TikTok is Dallof Productions, DALLOF, like Frank Productions. You'll find me on there. I think that you can also look me up by StoryTimewithChris. So yeah, that's a little bit of an introduction to myself. You guys will get to know me more as I film this podcast and, release more episodes with some of the stories that I have. And you'll get to know my wife as well, because as I talk about later in this podcast, she has shown interest in being in some episodes and telling some stories and being involved in the whole process. So yeah, I'm excited to get this thing going, and thank you for taking the time to get to know me and to listen to this podcast. And here we go. Here's a story about how I was hacked by Russians. Thank you. My original Instagram account, I started back in high school, and so it had a lot of photos from, my high school days, I guess, my my entire time in high school and the football team and all that. So it was, I had a pretty decent following. I don't even remember how many followers, but it was a good amount, and not nearly as much as I used to have on Twitter back in high school. Because, oh man, I had a ton of followers in high school. Now, I did do a lot of those like follow trains and stuff like that because I just wanted to show people that I had a lot of followers, even though they weren't real. So yeah, that number has dropped quite a bit because I think they got rid of a lot of those bot accounts or whatever. So I was hacked one morning. Well, I don't know what time exactly they hacked me, but I woke up in the morning and I had a few notifications from Instagram and my email that was associated with my Instagram account. I tried to log into my Instagram and it kept telling me that I had the incorrect password and I had to reset it. And so I was like, that's really weird. So I did like the forget password thing and tried to reset it through my email. But when I got into my email, it had two different notifications. The first one was a new login on Instagram from Russia. And I thought, okay, well, that's really weird. Like, I feel like I'm pretty safe with my passwords and stuff, and I don't click on any weird links. So what's going on there? And then there was another notification actually on my in my email account that said attempted login from Russia. So someone had clearly, been trying to hack into my Instagram and my email, but luckily they weren't able to access my email, which was tied to basically everything else that I was doing at the time, like Twitter, Facebook, blah, blah, blah. And so, yeah, when I saw that, I was like, man, Russia? The Russians really wanted my Instagram account. And I mean, they should have gone for Twitter because there were a ton more followers on Twitter, but I think there were about 300 on Instagram at the time. So 2,000 followers versus 300 followers. Which one do the Russians really want? And okay, yeah, I don't know that it was actually Russians. Someone could have been using a VPN and whatnot. But it sounds a lot cooler if I say it's Russians. So that's what I'm going with, and that's my story. But anyway, it was so weird because, a lot of people, a lot of the pictures on my Instagram were like on my old phone, which had died, and I no longer had access to any of those photos that were saved on my phone because the battery was toast and whatever. So yeah, a lot of those photos that I had posted on Instagram were all of a sudden were suddenly lost, and a lot of people would be sad about that. But I kind of saw it as an opportunity. I was like, okay, well, how long ago? I should have looked this up before. When did I join my new Instagram? Hold on, I need to figure this out real quick. Okay, so I couldn't figure out when I actually created my new Instagram account. However, my first post, which was right around the same time, was May 23rd of 2019. When I lost my Instagram, I was sad. It was rough, but I wasn't sad for long because I thought this was an opportunity for me to kind of rebrand myself and to, create my own little, I guess, brand. I have 170 followers, so yeah, pretty cool, almost influencer level. No, but back then I had visions of, I was trying to figure out how to rebrand myself and basically create this universe where I could, create multimedia stories and ideas that I've had in my head for a long time. Because back in high school, I took filmmaking classes and I got away from that in college. And I kind of wish I would have done that instead of going for an accounting degree. So yeah, it's something that's always kind of been an interest of mine. And now that I have this, and so I was trying to find a way for myself to have an Instagram that could be, this is more for like an online presence. And I haven't accumulated that yet. And I hope to one day, accumulate a place where I could have people who view my work and who view things that I create and enjoy them and have my own little thing. It's so interesting because I've had my own YouTube channel, and I've had several YouTube channels actually, and all of them were very different. And for me, I wanted to have this place where I could have my own little creative endeavors while also maintaining like a very personable. Everyone has like their private Instagram, right? Like where they share what their friends and family things that they're doing. Well, I wanted to kind of combine that and also create things. And I'll get into that a little bit later, like what type of things I want to create and, some of the ideas that I have had over the years. But I wanted it to be, a good mix between the two. And then I have my business account, my Dallas Productions account, which is where, you see a lot of my photography. You see a lot of the professional side of it. So yeah, this was more of a, kind of to branch off of Dallas Productions and be more of a personable, this is where I review coffee. This is where I show, not just the business side of things that I'm trying to accomplish. Anyway, it probably sounds like a lot of jumbled mess, but I'm trying to figure things out. Basically, I'm just trying to create my own little creative universe. And anyway, I'm going off on a little bit of a tangent. I'm just going to start with Storytime with Chris. I thought this was a way, the name of my Instagram account could also be the name for a podcast like I'm doing right now. And that's kind of where that was born. I was like, Storytime with Chris. What can I do with that? And to be honest, I think you can tell stories through so many different formats, right? Like music, poetry, podcasts, videos, photos. There's so many different ways to tell stories, and people have been telling stories since people have existed. It's a part of human history and a part of everyone's lives. Jeez, I cannot say that word for some reason. That's kind of where the origin of Storytime with Chris came. Like Storytime with Chris, I could tell my own personal stories like, oh, check out my pepper garden, or look at what my dog's doing, or look at where my wife and I just went, or this is what we're doing for date night. And also combine that with, here is a local business that I like. I want to do a story about this local business. Here is my coffee brand. I want to, tell the story about my coffee brand. I want to tell you stories about businesses around Salt Lake and Utah and, all my favorite people and businesses and all that stuff. So yeah, that's kind of where the name came from. I felt like it was a name that I could run with, and it had so many different meanings behind it. Yeah, that's your origin story behind Storytime with Chris. That's how we got to this podcast. And today I wanted to talk to you about this podcast and kind of, what this podcast is, what it will become, what I'm hoping to get out of this podcast, and where I hope it goes. And I mean, the whole main idea behind this is storytelling. And so that's what this podcast is going to, really focus on, in my opinion, is, telling stories in various formats. When I have a podcast, it's very easy to tell a story because you can talk into a microphone. I also have interest in doing stories in, other ways. For example, I've done poetry before. I've written songs. I've never recorded songs, but that would be cool. I would like to do that someday. There are other ways to tell stories besides with words, right? Music, filmmaking, maybe not exactly on a podcast, but I would like to, have tell filmmaking stories. And so, unfortunately, there's the idea of me telling stories and then having other people on this podcast to tell stories with. My goal is to have, multiple guests. I already have ideas for some people that I would love to have a conversation with and hear their life stories or stories about their business, or, just things that may seem very arbitrary and meaningless. But to be honest, everyone has their own story, and that's what I'm interested in. I'm not a journalist, so I don't really, I don't have any experience with that and in that kind of aspect. Well, actually, I was part of the newspaper for the local community college, Salt Lake Community College. So I do have a little bit of journalism in me, just a tiny bit. I've never taken any classes on it or done anything like that, but I have been a part of the newspaper. So mostly taking photos. I think I wrote an article or two. Yeah, anyway, I'm excited to have some guests on here. Hopefully have some, when I originally thought of this idea, I really wanted to have my buddy Chris Julander on the podcast with me. And while I hope to do a lot of episodes with him, I really want to, because I don't like talking just into a microphone myself. It's a little weird. If you've never done it yourself, it's interesting, because it's very different than recording, something for like TikTok where you have a camera and you can look at yourself. And I mean, I guess I can look at myself in the reflection of my computer, but that's not the same. I'm just talking into a microphone. It's kind of like I'm talking to myself and I'm driving myself insane. No, just kidding. But yeah, it's weird. If you've never recorded a solo podcast, it's weird. It's really strange, and it's like I'm talking to a lot of people, but there's no one else in the room with. Anyway, it's gonna take some getting used to, but I would like to have my buddy on here to because we have so many stories together, and I know he's got stories that are very interesting that I would like to recount with him, and I have some interesting stories that I would like to talk to him about. So hopefully I'm able to get him to join on at least a few episodes here and there. He's super busy and he's got a job that he's constantly working overtime and stuff. My job is very relaxed, and so I have a lot of free time to record podcasts and stuff like that. So yeah, he hopefully I'll be able to get him on here soon and introduce you guys to him. Another guest, or I guess co-host that I'm planning on having with me a few times is my wife, Jen. Yeah, she's expressed some interest in telling some stories and hopping on with me. So I know there are quite a few stories that we have together that we can tell you guys and kind of tell you about our experiences in life and, through various challenges and even stuff like vacations or our experience with our first dog or buying a house or our wedding and stuff like that. So that's what this podcast is all about. Ultimately, is telling stories, and while I would love to have a story to tell every week, there are going to be times where I want to discuss kind of the ways that other people have told stories. What I mean by that is there are other people who tell stories, right? Like I mentioned before, it could be through music, through movies, television shows, YouTube channels, videos, musics. I already said music, poetry, all that stuff that I mentioned before. I would like to discuss, the way other people have expressed their lives. For example, I've done a few album reviews for some of my favorite artists, and that's something that I would like to continue to do moving forward. As my favorite artists release new albums and songs, I'd like to kind of review them and share my thoughts on them, because that's a way that they tell their story, right? And there could be other, I've tossed around some other ideas that I might potentially do. Not everyone will be interested in all these ideas, but there's even discussing video games. Video games have their own story. It's kind of like a movie, but there have been some games that I've played where I would like to discuss, how was the storytelling in this game, and why did I enjoy this game so much in this series of games? Why did I like one game better than the other? Or things like that. Books. My wife could go on. I think she read like 54 books last year, which is insane, because I read one book and I barely finished. I had the goal last year to read one book, and I finished reading the book on December 31st. So yeah, I started the book back in, I don't even remember, June, July. Or maybe it was, I think it was even before that. Might have been January. I got halfway through. I stopped. We went to Hawaii. I restarted the book. And then it took me until December to finish it. So yeah, there's so many different ways to tell stories and to, talk about stories. So that's another thing that I really am excited to do on this podcast. And yeah, besides that, I have some different ideas for some segments that I might do, or themed sort of days. One that I've done a couple of times so far is Coffee Time with Chris. This is one that I would like to have on every episode that I release, where I discuss a new coffee that I tried, or a new coffee shop, or something related to coffee, just because coffee is a big part of my life and I love coffee. So obviously I just talked about the album reviews and reactions. Football talk is another one that I might be interested in getting into. I know that's not really a story. That's a different kind of story, right? Like, sports have always been big to me, especially football. And I think it would be very interesting to maybe not take a super journalistic approach at football, but to look at football and discuss some of the things that have been going on, specifically with my favorite team, the 49ers, but I won't limit myself to that. I'll talk about current events that are going on in the league and stuff. That's just an idea I'm tossing out there because, that's a story that's written every week, at least during football season and throughout the year. But we'll see what I do with that. It's an idea that I've tossed around, but I have other themed ideas for specific days. So, for example, if I release an episode on a Monday, it could be a Music Monday where I focus on music for that episode. Taco Tuesday, talk about tacos. Who doesn't like tacos? Football Fridays, etc. I just have, like I said, this is a work in progress, and these are just ideas that I'm tossing around. So we'll see what kind of themed days I do if I even decide to go that route. I know I've mostly done that with the album reviews that I've done, which you should check out, by the way. I've done Slipknot, Hollywood Undead, and Nothing More. So yeah, no Taylor Swift. Sorry. My album review is, I don't know. I don't listen to Taylor Swift, so my wife does. It's weird, okay? The sexy baby line in that one song, weird. That's my take on that whole album. That line ruined the album for me because that's just weird. Sexy baby. Why? Anyway, but yeah, some other things that I want to talk about are small businesses, going to different small businesses and their owners and talking about how they came up with their idea for their business, or, is it a family business? How did you inherit this? Did you want to make any changes when you inherited the business? Or that leads me to this kind of crossroads that I'm at where I want to have a wide variety of topics that I talk about. There are podcasts that are specifically for sport. There are sex podcasts. True crime is a big podcast topic. Lifestyle, health, wellness, business. And for me, I want to really cast a wide net when it comes to topics. I don't want to be stuck in just talking about football or talking about stories about awkward situations or things like that, or just about music, right? Because so far I've done just music, and that's cool. I mean, I'm going to do music reviews whenever, there are albums that I listen to that I decide to do reviews about. That sounds more proper. Like I said, I haven't done journalism, so my proper English is a work in progress. But yeah, I just want to be able to cast a wide net. So this idea that I've been kind of playing with is having episodes. So for example, if you're listening to an episode, there might be 3 different topics that I hit for that specific episode. Let's say I released an episode a month. Let's say for February, I discuss Valentine's Day, awkward dates, and coffee. Well, there might be people who aren't interested in listening to Valentine's Day or awkward dates or coffee. So the idea that I've been playing with is, releasing one single long episode for an episode with different segments within it. And then each of those segments will be released separately. So for example, if I did the coffee series, there will be a series just for coffee, so that if you go to my YouTube channel or my Spotify, wherever I release this podcast, if you go there and you just want to hear my thoughts about coffee, that's all you're interested in, then you can view that playlist, or you can just listen to those episodes. Or if you just want to listen to my football talk, that could be its own separate thing. But if you have interest in both or in everything I have to say, then you can check out the whole episode. So I'm still trying to, play with that idea a little bit and figure out how exactly I want to do that. But yeah, so with that being said, I know I said I would release hypothetically 1 episode a month. My goal is to have 2 episodes a month. So, 1 every 2 weeks. That's, it's not set in stone, and it depends on how much time I have every week because, like I said, I really want to, there are some episodes that I really, really, really want to have a guest on. And for me, I'm not like a crazy perfectionist, but I don't want to release something if it's incomplete, or if I feel like I can tell this story and it would be good with me just telling it, but it could be great if I have someone to talk to about it too. Then I'm going to wait until I can get that person and talk to them about this topic that I have. Yeah, that's the plan for now, is to kind of hopefully have bi-weekly releases we'll see when this first episode goes up, and then have episodes every 2 weeks after that. So yeah, that's another thing I've been debating on is, should I have specific days that I release? Should I release every 2 Wednesdays or every Monday? Just things you got to figure out when you are starting a podcast. Eventually, the goal is to have like weekly releases. I think that would be awesome. But at that point, I would want to wait until I have a good following. Right now, I'm not doing any advertising really for the podcast. Whenever I release the episode, I'll post it on Instagram, and anyone who's interested can check it out. But I'm just kind of trying to build a little bit of I'm trying to build the podcast, right? And this isn't something I'm planning on. I just want to do this for fun, honestly. So yeah, as long as I'm having fun, this podcast will keep coming out. Anyway, enough rambling. I wanted to end this introduction origin story with some of the episodes that will be coming out in the next year or so. So yeah, some fun things that you can expect to hear on this podcast are my wife and I's trips to New York, Hawaii, Moab, my solo trip to the Big 5 national parks in Utah, some of my moose encounters that I've had, which can also be considered near-death experiences, which I've had quite a few of, more than I wish, honestly, and just plain all the awkward situations, because everyone has awkward situations and they can be entertaining. And yeah, I think I have some good ones. So anyway, thanks for listening today. And I appreciate you for taking the time to learn about my origin story, or I guess the origin story behind Storytime with Chris. And that's what this podcast is. Storytime with Chris. Thank you.